Today we're going to be talking about the immigration in Mexico and how does it benefit the U.S. or, right, are Mexican people, not a benefit to the U.S.? Well, I think they're a benefit to the U.S. In my last video, you guys seen how I was talking about Haiti, but you're going to see how the numbers really change when we're talking about Mexico. And as you guys can see here, Dr. Richard E., U.S. versus Mexico. So U.S. versus Mexico, and here we're going to start to see a bit of a difference in the population size between the U.S., an estimated population size of 350 million people, whereas in Mexico, almost 126 million to almost 130 million. Now with the SB 1718 that just passed with Governor DeSantis in the state of Florida, right? And then we also have to take a look at the people that are born in the United States, which accounts for, as you can see here, this number of people born in the United States, around Mexican people, between 10.7 million Mexicans that are from Mexico and the U.S., because many people from Mexico are actually native also to the U.S. And as you can see here, in the U.S., there's approximately 45.3 million Mexicans, which accounts for 24% of the country. Now, in addition to this, we're also going to be talking about the demand, the cost, and also the supply. And as you can see, the supply is low versus the demand. The demand is very high for everything that the Mexican people are supplying. Now, some of the references I put up here, you guys could do your own research and see if my information is incorrect. You guys could double check it. Pew Research, Denver Law Review, Wilson Center, USTR.gov, USDA. Now, the visa that most Mexican people apply when they're doing farming is the H-2A visa, the farming from the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture. Now, the industries impacted by Mexican labor in the U.S. includes construction, very high number. On average, the government says is 13.4%. My estimate says is between 20, 25, or 30% plus. Again, sometimes when they account for Mexican, they're talking about illegal Mexicans. They're accounting for 13.4%. But if you're counting the legal people that are Mexican also, that number goes up drastically. And I think there may be either 30% or maybe even higher than that number. Now, restaurant industry, they account for a large number of service workers, especially in that industry. Farming and agriculture, they basically control that whole industry in terms of like 90 or 95% of the laborers in that industry being Mexican or people from other, Central American, South American, or those kind of countries. Farming and agriculture also includes crops, includes livestock, crop support. And you can see the study done on this on ERS USDA Gov. It gives you a very detailed breakdown of what that would be. Now, the labor cost, the labor is, 88% of the labor is coming from Mexican, and that's according to the United States government as well. And I provided some references on that, in a minute, you guys will see. Now, also, in addition to this, many Mexicans that are second generation or third generation Mexicans, they are buying homes on average at a very high rate, and also starting businesses and getting their additional education at a very high rate, and also serving within the United States military at a very high rate. So again, you're talking about people that are very effective in terms of their contribution to the United States. I mean, the numbers don't lie. Take a look at the CMS, the Center of Immigration Studies, says that in 2019, there were about approximately 283,000 Mexicans that were undocumented that were working at farm labor work. And this is by msny.org. You guys can look at that study for 2019. Now, the agricultural earnings for the United States based on the immigration labor was approximately $1.05 trillion US, contributing to the US GDP. And as you guys know, the US GDP is approximately $50 billion per annum or per year, however you guys want to say that. Now, the countries with the most immigration to the United States as of 2020, between 2010, 2019, or 2021, 2022. Approximately 88% are from Mexico. Well, I would say myself personally, when I've done some of the research on this, I would say the Mexico number actually has dropped, and I would say Mexico is probably between 70 and 65%. So that would be my estimate. Although the government is still showing Mexico at 88%, I would say that Guatemala, based on the government, it says 7%. Based on my research, I would say is between 15 and 20%. And I would say El Salvador was up, but it also has gone down again due to a more stable country now due to Bukele in El Salvador. So again, that one was about 5 and 7%, but the government is still showing that at 3%. Honduras, as you guys can see here, is showing at 2%. That's the government. And I would say that's actually higher. I would say that's between 4 and 5%. And then the last one, I would say Nicaragua, but I would also say that one be higher. And then we will also have a smaller percentage for Venezuela. Venezuela, I would say 0.005 or 0.001. And then we also have to include Haiti because there were a lot of Haitians and other people. And then I would just have to say, another 0.05 for other groups of other countries, right? They're coming into the United States as well through the border. Now, for the breakdown is females 37%, males is 63%. As you can see here, the U.S. versus Mexico. The U.S. State Department, you guys can go on the U.S. State Department website and look at this number. The U.S. State Department says that on average, is the U.S. and Mexico working together, they make $779.3 billion in 2022. This is based on the NAFTA, North America Trade Agreement. And again, this is the U.S. second largest partner. And then Mexico, due to the FDI holdings, they increased it in 1993, 1.3 billion initial investment to where it's sitting in 2010 of approximately 12.6 billion. So just this number and that number alone right here, we're talking about $2 trillion that Mexican people bring into the American. And then if you look at the 6 million, look at this, what that NAFTA agreement does, it creates about 6 million jobs in the U.S. that depend on trade with Mexico for the creation of those 6 million jobs. You guys can see there. So Mexico is a very important partner, right? Not only that, if we're talking about export and import, Mexico also contributes an additional 62.7 B in 2019. Goods exported 256 B. 256 goods imported 358 B. So again, Mexico is bringing a lot of value to the U.S. more than people realize. Now, the Mexican GDP is approximately $1.3 trillion per year. Now, Mexicans are also sending money to Mexico in around 54.1 billion. Now, the demand for the products the Mexican people consume is very high, 100%, because they do the farming. Obviously, that's the fruits. The vegetables, what I'm talking about? You're talking about the poultries, you know what I'm saying? You're talking about construction, you're talking about labor, talking about transportation, you know what I'm saying? You're talking about service, you see what I'm saying? You're talking about foods, you know what I'm saying? So overall, I would say the Mexicans are contributing very greatly. I would say the cost when Mexicans are doing this is relatively low. Right, the demand is obviously very high for Mexicans, and the cost for us Americans is low once Mexican work for us, and also the supply is limited if we take out Mexicans out of the equation. So then you can see that our costs would definitely increase, right? Our costs would differ. So let's say if it was a $1 here, then our costs would definitely increase to approximately, $2 or $5. Let's say this was like, I don't know what this could be, like, apples or strawberries. This is just an estimate. This number could 5x also, just due to the fact that most Mexican laborers are getting paid between 1/3 and 1/4 or 1/2, depending on who owns the farm of that. So then again, the cost for the Americans is very low relative to the labor. And then also the labor that we get from Mexicans is very much needed. So it stays relatively stable when we have Mexican workers in the US, versus when we have US workers, we have a 2 to 4x cost increase, right? Again, the state of Florida, Governor DeSantis, MS 10.7, people born in Mexico, 24%. So I would have to say, just to keep this short, I could do another video on this, that Mexicans are contributing between 10 and 15% of the US GDP. And I would say, and this is not counting for everything, because if we're talking about 2T, just on that part alone. So, the US said that it's between 4 and 6%. But this is for illegal Mexicans, between 4 and 6%. So if you do the 4 to 6% plus another 15%, we would have to say that Mexicans are contributing between 15-20% of the country's GDP, in terms of the labor and service of the entire country's GDP. Now, again, this number could fluctuate. It could be less or it could be more. And again, we're counting for illegal and legal. Here is illegal. And again, some people might say, oh, Mexicans are not illegal because, they're also Native Americans, and that is true. You know what I'm saying? But just if we look at the numbers, U.S. State Department, population size, SB 17, Mexico, we're seeing here that is actually a benefit to us to work with Mexican people. As you can see here, the demand and supply, the cost, the value that they get in Mexico, obviously this is 2 to 3 or 5 times what they get in Mexico or in their country. So they could definitely improve their standard of living. And also it helps us reduce the cost for us, right? So as you guys can see, that the benefits for Mexicans to get the H-2A visa is actually more beneficial than if U.S. Americans started doing this kind of work. Because if Americans started doing this kind of work, let's say an example, Americans are doing this work for 30 an hour, and Mexicans are doing it, let's say, for 10. Obviously, that's a 3x here in terms of the cost. So if you're buying fruits and vegetables, let's say for $2, and that multiplies times 3, we're talking about $6. So we're talking about an increase in price of about a factor between 2 to 4. And that's definitely not good for the economy or for the U.S. So again, I think that Governor DeSantis should retract this law, provide H-2A visas for construction workers from Mexico. Maybe not this one, because this one is for just agriculture, but provide visas for construction workers, laborers, and it could be temp visas, obviously for good behavior. And the other thing I didn't account for is that Mexicans are paying taxes, and most of the time they don't get the returns. There was a study done on average 150 billion, between 150 and $300 billion a year. So overall, Mexicans are contributing a lot more, than, again, you can see that by this numbers that the United States is running with Mexican people. Is just very obvious to see that what Mexicans are bringing into the table is a lot stronger than what many people think. And then many Mexican people, like I said, the second generation, they go to school, they purchase houses. So they're contributing much greater than even when my comparison where I did with Haiti versus DR, you can't even compare, because as you can see here, they're the main driving force behind the labor, service work, construction, farming, agriculture. They're one of the main drivers. I would say at least one quarter or 1/5 of the United States service and work. So again, just looking at this in terms of what they bring into the table, how the U.S. is set up, all the numbers, the U.S. biggest trade partner, it's easy to see that Mexico definitely deserves some respect, right? So you guys put some respect into Mexico. If you got any question, one more question about immigration and those kind of numbers, we'll make a following video. Thank you guys.